Anybody have a pen? I got to figure out what parts of this I'm going to cross off, so we can get the kids out for the Easter egg hunt. Here is an amazing fact, and this is truly amazing. In any given second, your brain, Nancy's already amazed. I wish you could see her face. In any given second, your brain, my brain maybe not so much, but your brain, in terms of raw sensory data, receives 20 billion bits of information. The old number was 11 billion. But as our science has gotten better, it's up to 20 billion bits of information every second. You know what that's like? That's like reading this whole Bible 40 times in a second. Wow. That's how much processing power your brain has. But you know what? Before you start feeling a little too good about yourself, do you know how much information we can hold in our conscious mind, in our attention? About 50 bits, which is basically a long phrase or a short sentence. So if you think about that, the world is a tremendous amount of data. We only perceive a portion of that, but it's a significant portion at 20 billion bits. But what we can actually pay attention to, it's only 50 bits. So what we tend to think of as reality is not even close. It's just what we believe about reality. It's just what we construct it from what we focus on. And this may surprise you to hear a priest say this, but that's why answers can be so dangerous. That's why thinking that we have the truth and somebody else doesn't, and looking down on those people, and not even necessarily, there's lots of ways beyond religion that people look down at people. Why it's so dangerous? Because that little slice of what we see is not even close to reality. And so it's really, really important that we learn to ask questions. And one of the things that I hope you'll do is develop a great list of questions and ask yourself those questions over time in your life. And so this morning, rather than standing up here in all my many years of wisdom and waxing eloquently in the cleverness of me, Josh used Peter Pan at the earlier service, and I always like that phrase, the eternal child. I'm not going to give you answers. We're going to reflect on some questions together and just see where that goes. So here's the first question. What brought you here this morning? I like that answer. That's a great answer. In today's gospel, I didn't mean that literally, but George, that's great. That's awesome. Appreciate that. In today's gospel, the people come to the grave of Jesus for a number of reasons. They come out of curiosity. They come out of love. They come out of grief. They come out of perhaps duty. At least John seems to come out of faith. They come for a variety of reasons. And I expect there's a variety of reasons that you're here today. Some people come for Jesus, right? And some people, it's an expression of faith. And we look forward to this day all year as a time when we can pull all the stops out like the band just did and worship God full on. And what a glorious thing. What a glorious thing that is. But others, that's not why you're here. You're here because, hey, your family's here. And you want to be a part of the family, and this is what the family does on Easter. Some of you who are young, and I know this because this would have been me when I was young, you're here because your parents said you have to be here. And frankly, you don't want to be here. You'd like to still be in bed or somewhere else or playing a video game, and heck, I get that. And what I want to say is we're especially glad you're here. We're glad all of you. Whatever's brought you here today, we're glad you're here. Now, that first question, what brought you here today, leads into a second question, and that question is, why are we doing that again? Right? And this is a question about our motivation, and we could ask about so many things, and I do hope that you ask this question regularly. Because when you get to the question of motivation, why are we doing that again? All of us want things, but there's one thing that we want more than anything else, and that differs from person to person. And only you are in a position to know what you want more than anything else. If a person wants more than, and what you want most, everything else is subject to that thing. I mean, that's just the reality of it. What you want most, everything else is subjection to that thing. So if the number one thing you want to be, and this is a glorious thing, is a great mom or dad, everything else is going to be subjected to that. If you want to be successful in your career, everything else is going to be subjected to that. If you want to follow Jesus and let these other things flow out of that, if that's your number one thing, everything else is going to be subjected to that. So it's a question about our motivations, and it's important to have a worthwhile motivation, and it's important to audit our motivations every now to make sure that we can say, hey, this is why I'm doing that. It's a question we love to ask at St. Matthew's. It's a large part of why we do this service. We said, why the heck are we doing that? And we realize that some of the things that people have been doing for a long time we don't need to do anymore. And when we stop doing some of those things, it frees us to experience God in a new and different and more engaging way. It's what Jesus asked, and it's what got Jesus into so much trouble. Because for Jesus, the most important thing of all things was Jesus wanted people to know how deeply they were loved by God. And he looked at the things that religion was doing in his day and age, and he said, why the heck are we doing that? Right? And so he would literally say, you've heard it said, but I say to you. So religion in their day was big on tribalism. If you're in the in-group, you're in, you should be loved. I mean, but if you're not, man, you deserve the worst that life will bring your way. So Jesus says, you've heard it said, love your friends and hate your enemies. But I say to you, and listen to this, love your enemies. Pray for them. And so he's saying, this whole thing that we're taught, this tribalism, why are we doing that? We're all connected in some way, shape, or form. Jesus was saying this a long time ago. So the sooner we learn to love everybody, everywhere, all the time, the better off we're all going to be. Problem was, a little bit perhaps like today, is that, or maybe a lot like today, people who have money, liked their money and didn't really want to give it up. A lot of people talk a good game, right? But when push comes to shove, it's a little hard to give up the things we have. Some people have power, and frankly, we like having power, so why would we give that up? Some people just like being comfortable, and who wouldn't? If you don't like being comfortable, they call that person what do they call that person? Person who likes misery or masochist. That's it. They call that person a masochist. Yeah, that's exactly right. So we don't want to be masochists, but at the same time, if people are comfortable and those people aren't comfortable, and we want to preserve our own comfort. Well, Jesus say, why are we doing that again? I mean, maybe we can all be comfortable if we do something a little bit different. And so people didn't want the world to change. People had power wanted to keep the power. People had money wanted to keep their money. People who were comfortable wanted to stay comfortable. And they didn't like what Jesus was saying. They didn't like Jesus saying, why the heck are we doing that? We want to keep doing that. No, Jesus, shut the heck up. We want to keep doing that. And that's why they put Jesus on a cross. And so again, I think this question, why are we doing that? I think it's an incredibly important question to ask in every area of our life because it gets at our basic motivations. And if you get that out of line, you get that wrong, there's no getting life right. And then that sort of leads to the next question. And the next question is, what's the worst thing that can happen to me? So Jesus saying, why the heck are we doing that? Leads to what seems like a pretty bad outcome, doesn't it? I mean, it sort of seems like the worst thing could happen. He gets crucified. Daniel Nayeri, author some of you know I love, he's written the book, Everything Sad is Untrue. I've recommended it here several times. Several of you have read it since then, and everybody that's talked to me has loved me. I presume that means the ones that didn't like it haven't mentioned it to me. But it's a fantastic book. I commend it to you. But he asks this question, and he talks about how he deals with worst-case scenarios. And so he said he wanted to be a writer, and he realized that was a pretty tenuous path. It's not too likely that a person succeeds in writing, and so he thought he might not be able to make a living. And he found that the anxiety that came from that paralyzing. So he said, what's the worst thing that could happen to me? He thought, well, what are the 4 worst jobs a person can have? And he listed being a ditch digger in Oklahoma in the summer, being a bicycle driver a bicycle messenger in New York City, and being itinerant worker building homes somewhere in California in the summer. The people who wait at Home Depot and then go out to the workplace afterwards. I don't know what the 4th one was. He never got to that when I heard him talking. But But he said those three, and then he did those three. So he went out and he dug ditches in Oklahoma in the summer in 110-plus degree heat. He went to New York City the next summer, and he worked as a bicycle messenger and was hit by 3 different cabs in the first day. And then he went out to California, and he worked building homes. And he said, you know what? That answered my question about what the worst thing that's happening could happen. And that freed me up to pursue what I wanted to do. And he said, if I never became a writer, I knew I could always fall back on one of these things and at least make a living. And that freed me up. And so in today's gospel, again, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that looks like it could possibly happen just happened. Jesus was crucified. Not a great ending for him. And Jesus' followers who put all their eggs in the Jesus basket, man, all those eggs are broken. Not a great ending for them. And their whole world comes crashing down. But they managed to put one foot in front of the other through this incredibly dark time. And somehow, God comes through. And really, that's the pattern of the whole Bible, starting in the Old Testament and going through and culminating in the resurrection. How in circumstances where it looks exactly like God cannot work, God does work. And in moments, which is perhaps a moment like this for you, a moment of darkness or disorientation or bleakness where it's hard to hold on to hope, in some way, shape, or form, just when everything seems darkest, God comes through. Man, I could tell you so many stories about my life. I know so many people here because I've heard those stories, could tell you those stories. That's just been my experience, and I hope that will be your experience too. The final question, and I kind of hope you'll talk about this one today, maybe around your Easter tables or whatever it'll be. I had a hard time with this question. And it's one I've asked a lot of people over the years. And so the question is, what is the truest thing you can think of? And the catch in that is, what's the truest thing? I know a lot of things that are true, or that I think are true, but what's the truest thing? And so when I ask people like that, sometimes people go straight to negatives, right? Because the truest things that we as human beings, because of our basic evolutionary leanings, we tend to focus on the negatives. You know, people will always disappoint you. You know, maybe something like that. There's always somebody messing something up somewhere, right? I mean, sometimes people answer something like that. Sometimes people ask about time. You know, time waits for no one. That's certainly a true thing. Or if any of you play the game Destiny, time delivers this. Oh, now I'm going to mess the quote up, but time delivers the same thing to everybody somewhere along the line. You know, there's lots of ways that people. One answer was, there's always somebody watching you. Maybe that is true. Somebody said the food in front of me is good. I actually really like that answer. Somebody said, I know that I'm loved. I like that answer. In the gospel today, for the people who are answering that question, what's the single thing that I know is most true? It's for them that Jesus is alive and risen, and his resurrection, his power is available to them in their lives. And we're going to be considering what that means over the next few weeks, and considering what it means to widen our attention and challenge many of the beliefs we have, even church beliefs, that I think will have a very real impact on your life. I think you'll be surprised by some of what we'll talk about, and I think you'll find it exceedingly helpful. But these folks were absolutely convinced that this was the case, and it changed everything for them. And when you ask me that question, what's the truest thing for me? Well, yes, I agree with them. They staked their whole life on it. I staked my whole life on it. But I have to think, is that really the truest thing for me? Because I wasn't there at the tomb. I mean, presumably they were there. Presumably this is good history. Presumably they saw everything, and so they experienced it, but I didn't experience it. So there is allowance in my mind that I could be wrong, right? I believe it. I've staked my life on it. I think you can stake your life on it, but yes, I think I could be wrong. So I really had to work with what's the truest thing I know. And you know what I came up with? The truest thing I know, of all things, the truest thing I know is that I am blessed. I mean, I just know that beyond an absolute shadow of a doubt. But then I think about it and I realize I know I'm blessed for me because Jesus rose from the dead and lives in my heart and has changed my life. You may answer it differently, but that's my experience. In the church, which came into being, everything was against the church when Jesus rose from the dead. The church is the single reason that I'm here today. And you'd expect a priest to say this. I'm not saying it as a priest. I'm saying it as a person. But, you know, it's in the church that I found mentors who shared with me wisdom that I did not have. It's in the church I found support at times where I needed support so badly when I just didn't even know how to put another. It's in the church that I found the wisdom that's guided my life when I put it into practice over the long haul with discipline, again, with the support of people helping me do that, has made for a good life, which in the moment it didn't even make any sense. I mean, that's why I stand before you blessed. And when I say that, then I think maybe I know even one truer thing, is that I think you can be equally blessed as well. Because I do believe God is a good God, and God wants to bless you and lead you into every good thing, if only you'll let Him. So, I hope you'll let Him. But whatever you do, I hope you found at least one question here today that gives you pause for thought, and that maybe you can use in the future as you think about your life and what you want from your life and how you're going to live your life. And I want you to know that I and we, the staff at St. Matthew's, we are 110% in your corner. We are rooting for you, and we love you very much.